Whether you're young or old, there's one rock and roll band that transcends the ages, and in one way or another has influenced just about every popular music artist out there since they landed on our soil. I'm talking about the Beatles. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. I believe those were the guys who were in the band. They provided a lot of memories. And what's your most memorable Beatles moment? There's a guy that has cataloged 50 of those moments in a book, The Beatles' 50 Most Memorable Moments. And Casey Piotrowski joins us right now live in the studio. How did I do with your last name? Did I butcher it?
A little bit.
Say it for me.
Piotrowski.
Oh,
it's
just
easy.
Piotrowski.
And you're talking over the vocal, Phil. That's not a good thing to do.
Oh, look at you, Radio 101.
Yeah, I could.
Who invited this guy?
I could have introduced you and gone right up to the post.
Right.
Had I known the music was coming.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Here's the thing that I've gotten. We talk about the influence of the Beatles, and I'm just going to go off of a tangent before the interview even starts. Okay. I'm done with hand clapping in songs. And that song, amongst the Beatles songs, is that the only song that has hand clapping in it? I've got the expert here.
Yeah.
No? There are others?
Hold Me Tight on the same album, and there's some later stuff that they did that too.
Can-
Where literally they get the whole song, everything's done, and then you have 4 Beatles just sitting there listening to a playback in the studio, and every once in a while it's...
Yeah. Right.
That's it.
Can I just have a moratorium on hand clapping in songs?
Well, they haven't
Yes.
done it for 40 years, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Right. Okay. Well, the Beatles haven't.
Can I have a cut of their check if all I do is like the hand clapper?
That's
Like,
right.
how much does that guy
It's
get
a union
paid?
gig.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, you wrote this book, and I'm gathering that you are an uber Beatles fan. Are you? What are you? Are you a historian? What do you consider yourself?
Unemployed actor. Mainly.
But you just love the Beatles.
Yeah, I was there when the group, broke in America, and everybody, every generation is wedded to the music of their generation, and this was the music from mine.
Right.
The most significant music of mine.
You've seen them live a bunch of times?
No, never.
Never?
Never. Long story behind that.
Okay, well, give us the short version of the long
Good
story.
luck.
And I'm going to hold your book up for the camera.
Okay, great. No, the Beatles, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and for a couple of tours, the Beatles were going to play in Toronto, just 90 miles away. And the radio station that I would later work at and that would later carry my show, The Beatles Show, is WKBW in Buffalo. And they had a contest where if you collect the most Orange Crush bottle caps, they were going to take a bus full of people from Buffalo to Toronto with a couple of jocks in the station to see the Beatles. Well, I said, gee, who would drink soft drink? What can I get? Because I couldn't drink enough Orange Crush to get me there. So my godmother owned a laundromat. And I said, Jesus, what, can I say that? What do people,
He's not here, it's okay.
I guess I just said it. Get him on the phone, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
I need all the people to buy the book that I can. And I went to my Aunt Teresa, my godmother, who owned the laundromat, and said, Aunt Teresa, can you save the bottle caps for me? Because KB Radio is doing this thing where the people get the most bottle caps, go and see the Beatles in Toronto. She says, well, your cousin Diane asked me first, and we'll divide them. And if there's enough for both of you to go, you'll both go. And if there's enough for only one, then she'll go. Well, obviously she went, and it was. How can I say this delicately? She was weight challenged then. Apparently, she's weight challenged now. If she took pictures, I'm sure there's all kinds of strawberry jelly on them and stuff like this. And I went to my mother after that happened, and I said, well, Mom, they're never coming back. They're never coming back. My mother says, oh, don't be crazy. That's too much money. They're coming back. It was a 66 tour. Beatles never played America again.
Yeah.
So never got to see them.
Right. I mean, these days, I'd say, come on, can't you work up like $10 and buy a ticket? But no, they never came back.
Never came back. But I got to see Paul and Ringo, and that's great.
Well, tell us about that. Where'd you see them?
Saw Ringo twice at the Greek Theater, saw him also at Irvine Meadows, saw Paul at the Pond. No, I saw him at Staples Center.
Yeah, but Ringo doesn't count, right? Like, he's the guy that nobody...
Only when he's drumming does he not, is he not able to
here,
count.
let's see. I've got the list of the top 50, and Ringo is actually on this list in a couple of places. Here, I'm just going to pass this around. You guys take a look. I don't know
What am
if
I
you've
looking
looked
at?
it. Here,
Let's see the list.
That's the
Yeah,
list.
let me see the list.
The top
from
50.
which the book came.
Yeah, and
Yep.
it's an interesting thing. Obviously, we're not going to blow through the entire list, and we want people to buy your book.
Go ahead.
We want people to buy your book too, so we're not going to shoot the entire thing here. But I bet we could go around the table here, and we might say the same thing is the number one thing, the number one most memorable moment regarding the Beatles. What would you say, Jay?
John Lennon, John Lennon?
Well, what, 33 years ago when he was killed?
That's the only thing that I would care about.
You wouldn't say
Well-
the Ed Sullivan Show?
The Ed Sullivan Show was amazing.
That was the most-
I
You guys were
remember
like
that very
50
clearly.
when that happened, right?
What did you say?
19
Nothing.
1950.
Nothing. I
What
didn't
did you say?
No.
Yeah,
gonna
Ben,
shake me.
Ben Franklin was guest hosting that night.
Yes, that's right. I remember because it was such a big deal with Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan was totally freaked out about the whole thing.
Yes.
And my parents were sitting there with us. I have such clear memories of the Beatles. I remember where we lived. We moved a lot. And it was such a transitional time in our lives. It changed everything.
That's why what happened with the Beatles is never going to happen again, because it's just
No.
too much diffusion of media. You'll never be able to get 73 million people short of a Super Bowl. You won't even get it for World War III. You know, when the
Yeah.
bombs are falling, people are going to still be ordering, cubic zirconia.
Yeah, well, here's
And it changed the way music is presented,
Right.
and it was a whole. It allowed musical artists to present to the public the way they wanted to, instead of what had been presented in decades past.
You know what, Casey? What the lesson that we didn't learn from the Beatles, the record labels didn't learn this lesson, is that look, the Beatles put out all this music, wonderful music, in a span of like 6 or 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these days, if a record label allows you to put out 2 records in a span of 6 or 7 years, you're lucky. And when the band is new, that's when all the creative juices are flowing. They should just be able to write as many and record as many songs as they possibly can when they just get together before they get jaded and start hating each other.
The amazing thing about the Beatles is they left virtually nothing in the vaults. I mean, I always wondered why Capitol didn't say, you got a day off, come in and cut 7 songs, because they could knock those things out. I'm not speaking necessarily about newly written stuff, but cover versions, because all the other bands left all kinds of stuff behind. We're just getting box sets now with stuff from the Stones, and the Who's been releasing stuff that stayed in the vaults for years.
So, like, in today's world, you have the corporate machine. So, like, this boy band that's out there, and forgive me, but the Beatles were a boy band.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The first one, huh?
The first
Preeminent
one, right?
yeah.
Okay. So, or the first, like, iconic one, I guess, because the Beach Boys were out around the same time. That's a boy
Yeah,
band,
you're
too, right? Okay. So, yeah, see, I know a little bit, Phil. Don't look at me and that
No,
amazed.
That's okay. I think back in the day I would have been into the Who, but that's all right.
Okay, cool. There you go. Another, boy band. Anyways, these guys, these One Direction kids, they're all 20-something guys, and they're put together through this corporate machine. Was any of that even fathomable back then? Like, or were these just, 4 guys that got together and started hanging out and, hey, look, we can play a song?
No, you had
Because I don't know.
No, you had a very driven manager in Brian Epstein who really loved the group and really found what he wanted to do. I mean, he was selling records, came from a family that owned department stores, and headed up their music department, their electronics department in Liverpool. Saw the Beatles and fell in love with them. He was gay, so there may have been more than fan worship there. Really.
Hi-yo.
And was driven to make them a success, and they were driven to become a success. And then they met George Martin, who was a brilliant record producer that could translate their ideas into the music. He taught them what they needed to learn about the studio, and then they taught him what he needed to know to translate these crazy ideas in their head into iconic, classic rock songs that are still around today.
Yeah, it's certainly true. I mean, they changed the world of music in so many ways, and they changed a lot of social and cultural
Absolutely.
parts of just general parts of life. I mean, teenagers just started going nuts after.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you thought the teenagers went nuts after Elvis. I mean, after the Beatles, it was a big deal. I mean, in the 6th grade, for my 6th grade graduation, I had striped multicolored pants on. I had Beatle boots on, and I had like pirate poofy sleeves on my shirt and like a humorous cummerbund. I had all these things on, and I thought it was great, and it was just right in the middle of Sgt. Pepper.
Yep.
And the long hair.
Right.
The parents were beside themselves with the
Yeah.
long hair. That was the destruction of society as
My
we know
dad
it.
said, "No, you're not going to school unless you're wearing a white shirt tucked in with a black belt and wingtips."
Where did you grow up?
Yeah. In what convent?
Not far from here.
Yeah.
Right up the street from
Yeah.
here. But, wingtips. And most of the
Sure.
kids had the wingtips with the taps on there. We used to slide
Yeah.
around school. But we all wanted to put on Beatle boots. Really,
Right.
really
Yeah.
did. You mentioned just a little bit ago, 33 years ago, John Lennon, just last week, 33 years ago, was killed,
matter
right?
of fact.
Unbelievable.
The 9th. And today is the 12th in real time. Skipping way ahead. as a Beatles fan, and in 1980, you're thinking, one of these days, the four, they're going to get back together. There's going to be a reunion.
Right.
You have your own justification for where you have things on the list. You had Sullivan first, but the death of Lennon is, I believe, number 7 on your
It's
list?
in the top 10.
It's in the top 10, but I'm
yeah.
surprised it's not number 2, because at that point,
Yeah.
the Beatles world changes. There will never be a reunion.
Well, it's in the top 10. I mean, the Beatles, the book is about, as I've had to think about it, as I've been speaking to people about it, it's about firsts, bests, lasts, and onlys. And I thought, in my opinion, that Sullivan had to come first, because without Sullivan, nothing else would have happened.
Right, that's the phenomenon. It
and
breaks.
then Pepper, which is the absolute pinnacle of their creativity.
Sgt.
Really.
Pepper, yeah.
Sgt. Pepper. And I knew Lennon. The top 10 felt really comfortable for me. The stuff beyond 10 and down to like 40 or so, a little bit mushy in terms of what should be where. I could play with that. But the top 10, from the day I thought of doing this as a series of shows on the Beatles show, was pretty clear as to what was going to go where, really. So I knew it had to be in the top 10, but I didn't think it was going to be. I didn't think it was up there with number 2. And in fact, number 9, I believe, is Real Love. The Beatles wound up having the reunion anyway.
Oh, okay. We'll see. Yeah, but John wasn't around. But talk about how that was put together.
What they did was, when they were going to do the Beatles anthology, they had reconciled the 3 remaining Beatles after years and years of financial difficulties. They signed a screwball contract with one another, which said, whatever money we get in, we're going to divide 4 ways because we're pals. Okay? Then they started hating one another, and they still had to divide their money up. And McCartney was making more money than everybody else, and he'd done a few other things, and so ultimately it was resolved in 1974 with McCartney giving back to the others money that he really earned by himself. So he resolved that, but there were all kinds of other issues.
Was this Wings money?
Yeah, Wings and Paul McCartney's solo money, yeah. You know, he was just selling more records than anybody else and therefore making more money.
Because he was the cute one.
Right.
Well, he was the most driven one, really.
Oh, yeah.
He was the most driven one, to be honest.
Yeah, because John could just disappear for an entire summer.
Yeah. John, I think, I want to get into psychology. I don't know how much time we have. But anyway, so they decided after reconciling with one another and all the lawsuits with EMI and with each other were done, and they became pals again, and they really did become pals again. There was a story when they went to see, what is his name? Spike Mulligan, great comic in England. And this is like 1998, 1999. And Paul, George, and Ringo are together, and they say, why don't we go see Spike Mulligan? And they drive over to Mulligan's house unannounced. They bang on the door like they're 18 years old. And his wife answers the door and says, yes, and sees Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr there. And Spike Mulligan, old, not in very good health, yells down the staircase, who's there? And his wife says, well, who are you guys? And they say, we're the Beatles. And she yells up the staircase, it's the Beatles. And she says, I don't want to see the bloody Beatles. And she sends them away.
She closed the door on
But
him.
they call themselves the Beatles. They are reconciled. But before that, they decided to do this anthology, their own history, told by themselves on video, later in a book. And they decided first to do some incidental music, just background stuff that would be done by the 3 of them. And they said, well, it can't be a Beatles record unless it's all 4 of us. So they went to Yoko, and on the night the Beatles were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Dun.
Yeah, I know.
Wait, do all Beatles fans universally despise Yoko?
I don't say that I despise her, but
Something like that.
She's on the list, and not necessarily for all good reasons.
Okay, all right.
She
so
was a
go ahead.
complication to be
They
sure.
They go to Yoko. What
They
happens?
go to Yoko. McCartney does on the night they get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they wind up. It was the night that John got inducted into the Hall of Fame because McCartney didn't attend the group's induction. And Paul says, well, we wanted to do some songs, and we'd like John to be on them. Do you have any demos? So Yoko gave Paul some cassettes of some of John's demos. And they did one song called Free as a Bird, which was on Anthology 1 and wasn't very good. Then they had one more, then before everything broke down, they did one more song called Real Love. And Real Love really recaptured the whole feel of it. I mean, McCartney shadowed Lennon's vocal. It had all the feel of a classic Beatles record. And then it was a top 5 in sales here, top 5 in sales in England. Got a gold record without any airplay.
I don't. You know what? I don't remember. Do we have that? Can we listen to a bit of it?
There you go.
It's real love.
Instantly recognizable chorus,
Yeah.
Great record, just didn't get any airplay. Should have been a number one. With that, they completed the reunion. With that, they satisfied the fans who, as I mentioned to Mike when I was here last, it was what a lot of Beatle fans wanted was just to see the four of them together, enjoying being pals again.
What year was this?
94, 95.
Oh, okay.
Came out in 95, and it came out early 96, Valentine's Day for 96.
And in perspective, I think we got to a point there where Yoko actually had enough closure with what happened to John.
Yeah,
and was able to open up the vault.
Yeah, and she said, and this is why she doesn't get totally panned in the book. I mean, she said, if they want to do a Beatles reunion, meaning the other three Beatles, I'm not going to stand in their way. And in fact, not only did she not stand in their way, she made a reunion of the four of them in the studio possible. I mean, if you listen to that song, Lennon sounds alive, and most of the home demos are very poorly recorded. Lennon had a home studio in England. When he came to New York, he just had this suite in the Dakota, which high walls, wood, floors, nothing on the walls. So the sound's bouncing off everywhere, and the demos are lousy. But luckily, Yoko gave the other Beatles a good one and a great song, and they turned it into one last miracle. They sped it up a little bit to make it more poppy. McCartney shadowed his vocal, and it came out to be just one great last Beatles record. After they did that, they started fighting again over doing a third song.
Yeah.
Because Real Love wasn't a hit. So Real Love not only created the union, it also broke up the Beatles again.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that it didn't get very much airplay because around that time, the grunge movement with Pearl Jam and Nirvana dominated everything and everyone. So if you didn't have that sound, sorry, you're not going to make it.
Well, I'll tell you, we had an alternative rock station in L.A. at that point. It was the station Gene Autry owned. It was K-Light that turned into KSCA, I believe.
Right, that's right.
And they
Adult album alternative.
They played Real Love, and it got to number 2 in L.A. I've got the charts at home, I think, that still show that. So it was a hit in the city, in that market.
Did Yoko ever push for, let's see, who was the favorite son of hers, Julian or Sean?
Sean.
Sean. Did she ever push for Sean to do a reunion? Because
No.
I think the fans
No.
would have preferred Julian, right?
No, there's a big probably because Julian has talent.
Well done,
but only for that reason.
Yeah.
There's a big celebration coming up on the anniversary of the Ed Sullivan appearance, 50th anniversary. They're doing a special Grammy thing with very contemporary artists covering Beatles songs. But Paul and Ringo are going to be in the audience that night. I'm sure at the end of the night they're going to get on stage and perform something. I don't mean George Harrison's song. I mean they're going to do some tune. And a friend of mine suggested that maybe Sean or Julian and Dahani, who is George Harrison's son, get on stage with them. And I don't want to see that. If we're gonna do that, let's bring all the 4 young Beatles children. They're not young anymore, for heaven's sakes. Julian's near 50, but the 4 Beatle male children, or 5 of them, on stage who've been musicians, and let them.
So do it all or nothing.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do it at all, frankly.
No, I'm with you.
I mean. Look, I wouldn't want to
nobody
my
wants to
father's.
see that.
That's a little, and they can't possibly live up to their
Right.
to their
Absolutely.
parents.
So we talked about the reunion song, Real Love, but
Right.
when you look at your list of 50, a lot of the 50 items are indeed songs. They're not necessarily events, although do you consider a song an event?
No, more like an accomplishment, something like that. In all the songs, basically, and you notice as we go through them, it's like Real Love is superseded on the list, higher on the list by From Me to You, and then Please Please Me's bigger, and then Hey Jude is bigger than that. The early songs, particularly, in that one led to the other, to the other, to the other. Love Me Do was there because it was their first record. Please Please Me was there because it was their first chart record. From Me to You was there because it showed that these guys weren't one-hit wonders.
And you also spend a fair amount of time on the list with historical markers at the early bands and with when they got together initially.
Yeah, that's in the top 10 too, because all of those things, how each guy joined the group, because, I felt that, and they're almost in order, that you have Ringo and then George is higher on the list and then Paul and then John. They're all part of the story, an intrinsic part of the story, because if you didn't have those 4 guys, you wouldn't have had the Beatles. You just wouldn't have. John and Paul were the drive engines, to be sure, but just the way the chemistry worked, and that really is something. It fits together like, a puzzle, the four guys together, and that was essential. And it was shown, I mean, Pete Best, who was in there before the group, was a lousy drummer.
Right, but we learned earlier in this episode of Phil Hulett and Friends that luck has nothing to do with the fact that Ringo got into the band.
Yes.
It was predestined.
Yes, it was.
I guess so.
We had a clairvoyant on the program.
Yes,
Oh,
she said
she
that
was-
there
she was
is no
great.
such thing as luck. It's all
Yeah.
predestined.
She was older than Yoko.
And she also said that the Beatles will never get back together.
Nobody is older than Yoko. I saw Bob Barker on The Price is Right today. He doesn't look as old as Yoko.
Really?
Whoa.
Well, Yoko does not look old. She spent a lot of money getting work done.
making herself look younger.
Yes.
So the live piece. This is when John and Yoko were in the bed, right?
No. That was the bed-in.
That's the bed-in?
Live piece was the first time John Lennon played live without some form of the Beatles.
Was this with Clapton?
Yes, Clapton was in the band. This was in Toronto.
Toronto. I have that record.
Yeah. It was.
And the Yoko's on stage with them. Is
She does
not?
side too. Yeah, probably in a bag.
Yes.
And most of the people in the audience probably wound up in a bag after having to listen to a half an hour of her.
Oh,
Yes, because you
man.
did. There's a whole Yoko part where
That's
what
right.
is- how do you describe? Was there ever a name assigned to that noise that she makes?
What's worse than awful? What's worse than dreadful?
Is that the word?
I don't know. There's
And
other
now
words I can
Yoko
use, but we're on
with
the radio.
dreadful.
I mean, really. I mean,
She's
love,
an
love
artist.
love is blind, and with John's devotion to Yoko, he also proved that it's deaf.
But is the bed in on the deal here?
No,
is it on
no,
the
I
list?
didn't put that in there.
Why not?
I didn't think it was important enough. I mean, it didn't really change things. I put on a lot of solo.
Well, I mean, that's what John
events.
wrote about in the Ballad of John and Yoko, right? I mean, we're
Yeah,
just
and the
trying
Battle
to get
of John and Yoko isn't on the list either.
right. But I mean, that's essentially what he
Well-
was saying, that it didn't make a darn difference, did it?
Right. No, I don't think. No, I think it raised awareness. It didn't make the difference I think John wanted, instant peace, but it raised people's awareness. It made a lot more people peaceniks and doing things like that for peace.
Yeah.
And that's positive. I didn't think it was positive enough for me to find it somewhere among the top 50. And
Yeah.
Beatles had a lot of events, more than 50 memorable moments.
Are the memories done coming?
I put a section in the book about the new album that just came out, because that new album was number one for 8. Beatles never had, before they broke up, an album hit number one, debut on the charts at number one. And On Air, the new Live at the BBC Volume 2 album, was number one 8 weeks before it was available in the stores. It went number one in Amazon 8 weeks before you could buy it. It's amazing. And stayed in the top 10 for almost 3 months. Amazing for a band. These are mono recordings, 50 years old, by a band that's half dead. There is no logical explanation for it, and most of the songs are available on other albums in different versions.
Who owns the publishing? Michael Jackson's estate?
Yeah, I was going to ask, who gets paid?
Well, I mean, the Beatles get paid for the writing of the songs if Lennon and McCartney wrote them or Harrison wrote them, but the publishing company is Michael Jackson's publishing company. He still owns
I mean,
that.
talk about that. I mean, that was the deal that did Paul make that deal or did Yoko make it?
Well, neither of them made it. Yoko wasn't around at the time. It's a long story that they put the Beatles, the whole company, Northern Songs, up for sale, and it was going to cost the Beatles a lot of money. They were going to have to borrow against future royalties to be able to buy it, but it would have been a good investment. And Lennon apparently made this obscenity-laced comment about the people who were selling the shares, and that apparently damaged things. And I'm going off the top of my head, not absolutely grounded in the information. But Sir Lou Grade, an impresario in England, bought them for his company, ATV, and ultimately Michael Jackson bought the rights to those songs from Sir Lou Grade.
At a time when Michael Jackson was just printing money.
That's right.
Yeah.
This was after Thriller, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
and before
Yeah.
he started having to give it to grade school kids.
Oh.
Whoa.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, I bet that made Paul McCartney happy.
He got. In fact, it was McCartney that suggested to Michael, you know what you ought to do? You ought to go buy some rights to songs because you can make a lot of money. Because McCartney had already done that.
I'll buy yours.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what he did.
I'll buy your library.
That's what he did. And
You think the Beatles have money? Nah. Look at this.
The two of them had recorded a little bit together.
Ebony and Ivory.
No, that was Stevie Wonder.
Oh, that was
Say,
Stevie
say,
Wonder.
say, and the girl is
Oh,
mine.
that's right. That
Sorry.
other guy.
So
Sorry.
racist.
I know.
Jeez.
Well, look, Stevie
They
Wonder's
don't-
black too. For
they
heaven's
don't
sakes, what are you
all
talking
look
about?
alike.
I
Come
don't
on
know.
Now. What's the matter with you?
It was just a malaprop. What's
Right.
the matter with you?
So and after that they never worked together again, and I'm sure the friendship was strained because McCartney really wanted to buy those songs.
Yeah.
And I know in his legacy, I don't think in his case or Yoko's it was a financial move at that point in the 90s or the 80s, as much as it was, we want our stuff, we want our recordings.
Does Paul need to keep touring?
To satisfy his life?
Ex-wives?
No. That's done. He only has
really?
one ex-wife, and no, I think he does it because he loves it.
Well, at least 3/4 of one.
Well, that's true. With a comment like that, you don't have a leg to stand on. That's all I can say.
So is it just ego?
No, I
To
wouldn't say
maintain,
wouldn't say
everyone but everyone has ego.
That's true.
And I don't
and he has a
mean
big
ego. I don't mean ego in a negative way, but that's been his lifeblood.
That's right. I mean, this is what he loves to do.
Right.
I hope it. I saw him, as I said, back 10 years ago or so, and the voice was pretty much was going then. It's further gone now. He can still do studio stuff. And they don't play with the voice. They don't use a lot of electronics on the voice to compensate for just the loss of the vocal quality. But he has. I hope if it gets to the point where he really can't sing anymore, he understands that he's cheating the audience. I never wanted to see the Beatles become what happened to Sinatra at the end of his life, where he goes on stage and
Can't remember the words.
sings like garbage, and at the end everybody gives him a standing ovation.
Yeah,
I mean,
listen
that's,
up,
Because
Steven
he's still
Tyler.
breathing. Because he's still breathing.
yeah,
Right.
I guess and I don't want to. The Beatles were the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see that happen to McCartney. And I pray he has the wisdom and the self-restraint and the respect for his legacy and that of the Beatles to leave the stage before it gets to that point. We'll see.
The book is called The Beatles 50 Most Memorable Moments. Casey Piotrowski, great to talk to you. And where can you get the book? Just
You can get it from cgpublishing.com. It's not available in stores.
Not available Amazon or any of those places?
No. Publisher's
Okay.
decision.
And the name of your show is?
The Beatles Show.
And where can they find that?
Look online. Our website is thebeatlesshow.net.
Okay.
On a lot of places in the country, but not on in L.A. yet. Hopefully
Pleasure
soon.
to talk to you. You know
Very
your stuff.
interesting.
Thank
This
you,
was
guys.
good. I didn't know if we were going to get, all Beatled out, but we did.
Not a chance.
Oh, yeah, I know. This brings you right back, doesn't it?
Yep. Not possible to get
All
beatled
right.
out.
Casey, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you all.